She should have left earlier. Sage Caldwell pressed her palm against her rounded belly, feeling Luna's restless kicks as she stared at the departure board through tear-blurred vision. The last flight to Portland had just disappeared from the screen, taking with it her only chance to reach Avery before morning. Her younger sister lay unconscious in a Portland hospital, and here she was, 6 months pregnant, stranded in Denver International Airport, with exactly $43 in her checking account. The baby moved again, as if sensing her mother's distress. Sage whispered soft reassurances, though she wasn't sure who needed comforting more. Her elegant midi dress, usually perfectly pressed, now bore wrinkles from the long day of travel delays. Her honey blonde hair had escaped its careful bun, framing her face in disheveled waves that somehow made her green-blue eyes appear even more striking and vulnerable. She found a quiet corner near the floor-to-ceiling windows, where the lights of Denver stretched endlessly below. Other passengers hurried past with their rolling suitcases and purposeful strides, everyone heading somewhere important. Everyone except her. "Ma'am, are you all right?" The voice was deep, warm, with just a hint of concern that made her look up. The man standing before her wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, and his blue eyes held an intensity that made her breath catch. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and a neatly trimmed beard, he looked like he'd stepped out of a boardroom and into her chaos. "I'm fine," she lied, wiping her cheeks with the back of her hand. "Just pregnancy hormones." He didn't move away. Instead, he glanced at the departure board, then back at her face. "Portland. How did you—" "Lucky guess. I couldn't help but notice you've been watching that board for the past 20 minutes. He paused, studying her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I'm headed there myself. Private jet, if you need a ride." Sage's first instinct was to refuse. She'd learned early that accepting help from strangers, especially wealthy, attractive strangers, always came with strings attached. But Luna kicked again, harder this time, and the thought of Avery lying alone in that hospital bed made her chest tighten with panic. "I don't even know your name," she said quietly. "Kieran Vale." He extended his hand, and when she took it, his grip was firm but gentle. "And you are?" "Sage Caldwell." She hesitated, then added, "Dr. Sage Caldwell." Something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe, or surprise. "Doctor, then. What's your specialty?" "Obstetrics." She managed a small smile. "Ironic, considering I'm about to become my own patient in a few months." "Congratulations." The word came out softer than she expected, almost reverent. "First child?" "Yes, and—" She stopped, realizing she was about to share her most personal truth with a complete stranger. But something in his eyes made her feel safe. "And it's just me. Just us, I mean." Kieran was quiet for a moment, his gaze dropping to her belly, then back to her face. When he spoke, there was no judgment in his voice, only understanding. Sometimes the strongest people are the ones who choose to go it alone. The words hung between them like a bridge she wasn't sure she was ready to cross. But as another announcement echoed through the terminal, something about weather delays and canceled flights, Sage felt her resolve crumble. "Why would you help me?" she asked. "You don't owe me anything." "No," he agreed, slipping his hands into his pockets. "But maybe that's exactly why I want to." As they walked toward the private aviation terminal, Sage caught her reflection in the polished floor. She looked like a woman on the edge of something. Whether it was breakdown or breakthrough, she couldn't tell. But for the first time in hours, she felt like she could breathe again. She had no idea that the man walking beside her had just made a decision that would change both their lives forever. And neither of them knew that in 30 minutes, their plane would be forced to make an emergency landing, stranding them together in a way that would test everything they thought they knew about love, trust, and second chances. The plane shuddered violently, and Sage's hand instinctively flew to her belly. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking." The voice crackled through the intercom, barely audible over the howling wind outside. "We're experiencing severe weather conditions and will need to make an emergency landing in Casper, Wyoming. Please remain seated and keep your seatbelts fastened." Sage closed her eyes, fighting the wave of nausea that had nothing to do with morning sickness. Through the small window she could see nothing but swirling white, a blizzard that seemed to have swallowed the world whole. Luna shifted restlessly, as if she too could sense the turbulence. "Hey!" Kieran's voice cut through her panic. He was seated across from her in the luxurious cabin, his own seatbelt secure. but his attention entirely focused on her face. "Look at me, Doc." She opened her eyes, meeting his steady blue gaze. Even in the midst of the storm, he looked unshakable, the kind of man who probably commanded boardrooms with the same calm authority he was using now. "Tell me about your sister," he said, his voice deliberately casual. "Avery, right? How did you—" She paused, remembering she'd mentioned the name earlier. "She's 23, a photographer, always chasing the perfect shot." Her voice caught. She was driving back from a wedding in the mountains when the accident happened. "Photographers have good instincts," Kieran said, unbuckling his seatbelt as the plane touched down with a jarring bump. "She'll be okay." The confidence in his voice made her want to believe him. As the aircraft finally came to a stop, Sage realized she'd been holding her breath. Outside, the storm raged with a fury that seemed almost personal. "Well," Kieran said, helping her to her feet, "looks like we're spending the night in Wyoming." The Casper airport was small, barely more than a regional hub, and half the staff had already gone home due to the weather. A weary-looking woman behind the information desk shook her head when they approached. "Nothing's going out tonight, hun. Maybe not tomorrow either, the way this storm's looking." She glanced at Sage's obvious pregnancy with sympathy. "There's a motel about 15 minutes from here, the Pine Ridge Inn. Only place still taking guests with the roads like they are." Kieran was already pulling out his phone. "I'll call for a car." "No cars running either," the woman said with a tired smile. "But Joe's got his truck. He can probably get you there for $50. $50? Sage felt her chest tighten again. But before she could speak, Kieran was handing over the money to a grizzled man in a flannel shirt, who looked like he'd driven through worse storms than this. The Pine Ridge Inn was exactly as modest as it sounded, a single-story structure with peeling paint and a neon sign that flickered intermittently. But it was warm, and the elderly woman at the front desk had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Storm's got everyone stranded," she said, checking her reservation book. "I've got one room left. It's got 2 beds, if that works for you folks." Sage felt heat rise in her cheeks. "We'll take it," Kieran said smoothly, placing his credit card on the counter. "And thank you." Room 12 was small but clean, with faded floral wallpaper and 2 queen beds separated by a nightstand. Sage sat heavily on the bed closest to the window, finally allowing herself to feel the exhaustion that had been building all day. "I should call the hospital," she said, reaching for her phone. "Check on Avery." But when she tried to dial, there was no signal. The storm had knocked out the cell towers. "Here." Kieran handed her the room's landline phone. Hospital's probably used to worried family members calling. As she dialed, he moved quietly around the room, adjusting the heat, checking that the windows were secure. Small gestures, but they made her feel taken care of in a way she wasn't used to. The nurse at Portland General was reassuring. Avery was stable, sleeping, responding well to treatment, but she wouldn't wake up for several hours yet. "She's okay," Sage said after hanging up, and only then realized she was crying again. Kieran sat on the edge of his own bed, facing her. "You don't have to be strong all the time, you know. I don't have a choice," she said quietly. "When you're doing it alone, strength isn't optional." "You chose this?" he asked, and there was genuine curiosity in his voice, not judgment. "The single mother path?" Sage nodded, one hand resting on her belly. "I'm 28. I've been waiting for the right person, the right time, the perfect situation, and then I realized, what if it never comes? What if I spend my whole life waiting for someone else to make my dreams possible?" Kieran was quiet for a long moment, studying her face in the lamplight. "That's incredibly brave, or incredibly stupid." "No," he said firmly, "brave. And Luna's lucky to have you." Something in the way he said her daughter's name made her look at him more closely. "You really think so?" "I know so." He paused, then added more quietly, "I wish I'd had a mother who wanted me that much." The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken history. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside their small room, something had shifted. And as Sage drifted off to sleep that night, she found herself thinking not about the man she was running toward, but about the one sleeping just 6 feet away. She woke up to the smell of coffee and the sound of quiet conversation. Sage blinked in the early morning light filtering through the thin motel curtains. Momentarily disoriented, the storm had passed, leaving behind a world blanketed in pristine white snow. But what caught her attention wasn't the weather. It was Kieran sitting at the small table by the window, speaking in low tones into his phone while a steaming cup waited beside him. "I don't care what Henderson says about the quarterly projections," he was saying, his voice carrying that authoritative edge she'd glimpsed at the airport. "Move the meeting to Thursday. Something more important came up. Something more important." Sage felt an unexpected flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with Luna's morning stretches. Kieran noticed she was awake and held up a finger, wrapping up his call. "We'll discuss this later, Marcus." "No, later means later." He hung up and turned to her with a smile that seemed to transform his entire face. "Good morning, Doc. Sleep well?" "Better than I expected," she admitted, sitting up slowly. The baby had been active during the night, but somehow she'd managed to rest. "Is that coffee I smell?" "The finest gas station brew Wyoming has to offer," he said, gesturing to a second cup on the nightstand. "The owner's son made a supply run this morning. I got you decaf. Figured you probably have to watch the caffeine." The thoughtfulness of the gesture hit her unexpectedly. When was the last time someone had anticipated her needs like that? "Thank you. That's very considerate. I have my moments," he said, returning to his seat. Spoke to the airport. "We're still grounded until this afternoon at the earliest. The runways need to be cleared." Sage reached for her phone, checking for messages. Still no signal. "I should try calling the hospital again." "Already did. Your sister had a good night. Vitals are stable, and the doctor expects her to wake up sometime today." She stared at him. "You called about Avery?" "Figured you'd want to know as soon as possible." He shrugged, but something in his expression suggested the gesture meant more than he was letting on. "Hope you don't mind that I said I was a family friend." "I don't mind," she said quietly. I'm not used to people doing things like that for me." "What kind of things?" "Caring about what I need before I even ask for it." Kieran set down his coffee cup, his blue eyes studying her face. "That says more about the people in your life than it does about you." There was something in his tone, not pity, but understanding, that made her look at him more closely. "What about you, Mr. CEO? Who takes care of you?" "I take care of myself," he said simply. "Always have." "That sounds lonely." "Lonely is relative." He paused, then added with a slight smile, "Though I'm finding the company refreshing." The compliment hung between them, warm and unexpected. Sage felt heat rise in her cheeks and took a sip of her decaf to hide her reaction. "So what does a tech magnate do when he's stranded in Wyoming?" "Apparently, he sits in a motel room and tries to figure out how to make conversation with the most interesting woman he's met in years." "I'm not that interesting," she protested. "You're a doctor who chose to have a baby on her own. You're traveling across the country to be with your sister despite being 6 months pregnant, and you're handling being stranded by a blizzard with more grace than most people handle a delayed coffee order." He leaned back in his chair. "Trust me, Doc. You're interesting." Luna chose that moment to deliver a particularly strong kick, making Sage gasp and place both hands on her belly. "Easy there, little one," she murmured. "Is she okay?" Kieran asked, immediately alert. "She's fine. Just reminding me she's there." Sage smiled down at her belly. "She's been extra active since yesterday. I think she can sense when I'm stressed." "Can I?" Kieran hesitated, then gestured toward her belly. "Would it be okay if You want to feel her kick?" He nodded, and something in his expression, vulnerability mixed with wonder, made her decision easy. "Come here." He moved to sit on the edge of her bed, and she guided his hand to the spot where Luna was most active. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, as if she'd been waiting for an audience, Luna delivered a solid kick right against Kieran's palm. His reaction was immediate and profound. His eyes widened, his breath caught, and for a moment he looked like a man who'd just witnessed a miracle. "She's strong," he whispered. "She gets that from her mother," Sage said, but her voice came out softer than she'd intended. Kieran's hand remained on her belly, his thumb tracing a gentle circle. "What's it like, knowing she's there, knowing she's yours?" "Terrifying and wonderful and completely overwhelming," Sage admitted. "Sometimes I lie awake at night wondering if I'm making the right choice, doing this alone. But then she moves, and I think, she chose me too, you know? Out of all the possibilities, all the ways she could have come into this world, she chose me." "She's not the only one," Kieran said quietly, his eyes meeting hers. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Neither of them was quite ready to examine. Outside, the snow continued to fall, but inside their small room, The world had narrowed to just the two of them and the tiny life growing between them. And as Sage looked into Kieran's eyes, she realized something that both thrilled and terrified her. She was falling in love with a man she'd known for less than 24 hours. The question was, what was she going to do about it? Tell me something you've never told anyone else. The request came out of nowhere as they sat in Millie's diner, the only restaurant in town brave enough to stay open during the aftermath of the blizzard. Kieran had suggested they get out of the motel room for a while, and Sage had been grateful for the change of scenery. The small diner was warm and cozy, with checkered tablecloths and the kind of apple pie that reminded you of home, even if you'd never actually had a home like that. Sage looked up from her grilled cheese sandwich, studying Kieran's face across the worn Formica table. That's a dangerous question, Mr. CEO. Kieran, he corrected, and maybe I like danger. She took a sip of her milk, buying time. Outside the window, the main street of Casper looked like something from a Christmas card, all white snow and twinkling lights from the few shops that had reopened. You first. Fair enough. He leaned back in the vinyl booth, his fingers wrapped around his coffee mug. I've never been in love. Real love, I mean, the kind that changes you. The admission hung between them, raw and honest. Sage felt her breath catch. Never. I thought I had a few times, but it was always convenient, compatible, two successful people who looked good together at corporate events. He shrugged, but she could see the vulnerability in his eyes. I'm 32 years old and I've never felt like I couldn't live without someone. Maybe that's not a bad thing, Sage said quietly. Maybe that means you haven't settled. Or maybe it means I'm incapable of feeling that deeply. His smile was self-deprecating. My therapist would have a field day with that statement. You have a therapist. Shocked. The ruthless CEO has feelings after all. Not shocked, impressed. She met his gaze steadily. It takes strength to admit you need help. Your turn, he said, deflecting the compliment. Secret confession time. Sage hesitated, then decided to match his honesty with her own. I've never felt beautiful. Not really. People tell me I am, but... She gestured vaguely at herself. I've always felt like I was pretending to be someone more interesting than I actually am. Kieran's expression shifted, something intense and almost angry flashing in his eyes. Who made you feel that way? The question was so fierce, so protective, that it caught her off guard. No one specific. Just life, I guess. Growing up as the responsible one, the one who had everything figured out. Beauty feels frivolous when you're busy being practical. That's the biggest load of bullshit I've ever heard. She blinked. Excuse me? You are without question the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. And I'm not talking about your face. Though that's... He shook his head. I'm talking about the way you touch your belly when you talk to Luna. The way you called the hospital 3 times this morning just to check on your sister. The way you didn't hesitate to get on a plane with a stranger because someone you love needed you. Sage felt tears prick her eyes. Kieran, I'm not finished. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to something almost intimate. You chose to create life on your own terms. You're building a family with nothing but hope and determination. That's not just beautiful, Doc. That's extraordinary. A tear slipped down her cheek, and she wiped it away quickly. You don't even know me. I know enough. His hand moved across the table, covering hers. I know that in 24 hours, you've made me feel more alive than I have in years. The waitress, Millie herself, chose that moment to refill their coffee cups, giving them a knowing smile. You two are sweet together, she said with the casual familiarity of someone who'd been serving coffee and dispensing wisdom for decades. Reminds me of my Harold and me when we first met, 43 years next month. After she moved on, Sage found herself studying their joined hands on the table. She thinks we're together. Would that be so terrible? The question was quiet, careful, but it landed with the weight of everything they weren't saying. Sage looked up to find Kieran watching her with an expression that made her heart race. I'm having another man's baby, she said quietly. No, he said firmly. You're having your baby. Luna is yours. Made from your choice, your courage, your love. The donor was just biology. It's complicated. The best things usually are. Her phone, which had been silent for hours, suddenly buzzed with a text message. The cell towers were back online. She glanced at the screen and felt her heart stop. What is it? Kieran asked, immediately alert. Avery's awake, she whispered. She's awake and asking for me. Relief flooded through her so powerfully that she started to cry again. But this time, when Kieran reached across the table to hold her, she didn't pull away. "We'll get you there," he said quietly. "I promise." And as she sat in that small diner in Wyoming, holding hands with a man she barely knew but was already falling for, Sage realized something that would change everything. For the first time in her life, she believed someone when they made her a promise. The question was whether she was brave enough to make one in return. She had never run through an airport while 6 months pregnant. Sage's breath came in short gasps as she hurried through Portland International, one hand on her belly, the other clutching the handle of her small suitcase. Kieran matched her pace effortlessly. His longer strides shortened to accommodate her condition. His attention split between her face and the signs directing them to ground transportation. The flight from Casper had been smooth, but the 3-day delay felt like a lifetime. During those stolen hours in Wyoming, something fundamental had shifted between them. They'd shared stories over diner coffee, played cards in the motel lobby while waiting for updates, and talked until late into the night about everything and nothing. By the time they'd boarded his jet, the careful distance between them had evaporated entirely. "Slow down, Doc," Kieran said, catching her elbow gently. "Avery's stable. A few more minutes won't change anything." "I know, She paused, one hand moving to her lower back. "I need to see her. I need to know she's really okay." "Hey." He stopped walking entirely, turning to face her in the middle of the busy terminal. "Look at me." She met his eyes, those steady blue depths that had become her anchor over the past few days. "She's going to be fine," he said quietly. "And so are you. Both of you." His hand moved to her belly without conscious thought, a gesture that had become natural over their time together. Luna responded immediately, a gentle kick against his palm that made him smile. "She knows your voice now," Sage said softly. "She always moves when you talk." Something vulnerable flickered across Kieran's features. Smart kid. She knows a good thing when she hears it. The ride to Portland General Hospital took 20 minutes through typical Oregon drizzle. Kieran sat beside her in the back seat of the taxi, his hand covering hers, his thumb tracing small circles against her wrist. Neither of them spoke, but the silence felt full rather than empty. "Mr. Vale," the driver said, glancing in the rearview mirror. "Mind if I ask what you do for work? That's some serious hardware you've got there." He nodded toward Kieran's platinum watch. "Technology consulting," Kieran replied smoothly, not taking his eyes off Sage's profile. "Must be good at it." The driver chuckled. "I have my moments." Portland General's third floor was a maze of white corridors and antiseptic smells that immediately put Sage in professional mode. She'd worked in hospitals long enough to read the subtle signs, the relaxed posture of the nurses, the absence of urgent beeping from monitors. Good signs. Avery was awake, propped up against white pillows, her left arm in a cast but her smile intact. At 23, she had the same green-blue eyes as her sister, but with a mischievous spark that illness couldn't quite dim. "Sage?" Her voice was hoarse but strong. "God, you look huge." "When did that happen?" 3 days ago when I thought I was going to lose you," Sage said, tears streaming down her face as she hugged her sister carefully. "Don't you ever scare me like that again." "I'll try to keep my dramatic flair to a minimum," Avery said, then looked past Sage to where Kieran stood in the doorway. "And who's the gorgeous stranger lurking in my hospital room?" "Avery, this is Kieran Vale. He's—" Sage hesitated, realizing she didn't know how to finish that sentence. "I'm the one who brought your sister home," Kieran said simply, stepping forward to extend his hand. "It's good to see you awake." "Home," Avery repeated, looking between them with the shrewd perception that had made her such a good photographer. Interesting word choice. They stayed for 2 hours, until Avery's eyes grew heavy with medication, and the nurses suggested she rest. Walking back through the hospital corridors, Sage felt the adrenaline that had carried her for days finally beginning to fade. "I should find a hotel," she said as they reached the lobby. "Somewhere close by so I can visit tomorrow." "There's a Marriott 2 blocks away," Kieran said. "I'll walk you over. You don't have to do that. I'm sure you need to get back to San Francisco, to your work." Sage, her name on his lips, stopped her mid-sentence. "I'm not in a hurry to leave." The words hung between them, loaded with possibility and the weight of everything they hadn't yet said. In the hospital's fluorescent lighting, Kieran looked different somehow, less like the polished CEO she'd met at the airport and more like the man who'd held her hand in a Wyoming diner. "I don't know what this is," she said quietly. "Between us, I mean." "Neither do I," he admitted. "But I'd like to find out." I'm having a baby in 3 months. I know. My life is complicated. So is mine. This could be a terrible idea. Probably. His smile was soft, genuine, but terrible ideas sometimes turn out to be the best ones. As they stood there in the hospital lobby, surrounded by the quiet bustle of evening shift changes and visiting families, Sage felt something she hadn't experienced in years. The possibility of letting someone else share the weight. Okay, she said finally. Let's see what happens. Kieran's answering smile was brilliant, transformative. Okay? But as they walked toward the hotel through the gentle Portland rain, neither of them knew that in less than 2 months, fear would drive him away from everything he'd just promised to explore, and neither of them could have imagined how much it would cost them both when he left. The baby's room was coming together beautifully. Sage stood in the doorway of her Portland apartment, watching Kieran assemble the crib with the focused intensity he brought to everything. His sleeves were rolled up, his usually perfect hair slightly mussed, and there was a small screwdriver between his teeth as he studied the instruction manual. For a man who commanded billion-dollar deals, he was surprisingly meticulous about following furniture assembly directions. You know, we could have hired someone to do this, she said, settling into the rocking chair they'd chosen together the week before. Where's the fun in that? He mumbled around the screwdriver, then looked up at her with that smile that still made her stomach flutter. Besides, I want to build something for Luna with my own hands. 2 months. It had been 2 months since Wyoming, since that night in the diner when everything changed. 2 months of Kieran splitting his time between San Francisco and Portland, working remotely when he could, flying back and forth when he couldn't. 2 months of falling into a rhythm that felt both new and inevitable. He'd been there for her 30-week appointment, holding her hand while they watched Luna's profile on the ultrasound screen. He'd assembled a bassinet for the living room, learned to make her favorite pregnancy tea, and read 3 different books about newborn care. When she'd had trouble sleeping, he'd rubbed her back until she drifted off. When she'd craved ice cream at midnight, he'd driven to 3 different stores until he found the exact flavor she wanted. Kieran, she said softly, watching him work, can I ask you something? Anything. What happens after she's born? His hand stilled on the crib rail. It was a question they'd both been avoiding, dancing around it for weeks. His life was in California. Hers was here. Luna was due in 4 weeks. So what do you want to happen? He asked carefully. I want... She hesitated, then forced herself to be honest. I want you to stay. I want us to figure out how to be a family, whatever that looks like. He set down his tools and moved to kneel beside her chair, taking her hands in his. Sage, I need you to know something. These past 2 months, they've been the best of my life. Watching you, watching Luna grow, being part of this. I never knew I could feel this way about anyone. But, his voice was firm. I love you. I love both of you, and I'm not going anywhere. Relief flooded through her so powerfully that tears sprang to her eyes. You love me? Completely, irrevocably, in a way that terrifies and thrills me every single day. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead against hers. I love your strength, your stubbornness, the way you talk to Luna like she can understand every word. I love how you make me want to be better than I am. You don't need to be better, she whispered. You're perfect exactly as you are. I'm not perfect, Aunt Doc. Far from it. But with you, I want to try to be the man you see when you look at me. Luna chose that moment to deliver a particularly strong kick, making them both laugh. Kieran's hand moved to Sage's belly automatically, a gesture that had become second nature. She's getting stronger, he said with wonder. Feel that? She knows her daddy's voice, Sage said, then froze. The word had slipped out without conscious thought, but it felt right, natural. Kieran's eyes widened. Daddy, if you want to be, she said quietly. I know she's not biologically yours, but biology doesn't make a father, he said fiercely. Love does. Commitment does. Being there does. His hand spread wider across her belly. I want to be there for every scraped knee, every bedtime story, every school play. I want to teach her to ride a bike and scare away her first boyfriend and walk her down the aisle someday. Even though she's not yours, she is mine, he said simply. You both are, if you'll have me. Sage felt her heart expand until it seemed too big for her chest. Yes, she whispered. Yes, we'll have you. They sat like that for a long time, his hand on her belly, her fingers tangled in his hair, planning a future that felt as solid and real as the crib he'd been building. They talked about cribs and college funds, about bedtime routines and family vacations. They picked out names for future siblings Luna might have, debated the merits of different school districts, and argued playfully about whether she'd inherit Sage's stubbornness or Kieran's intensity. Both, probably, Sage said with a laugh. Poor kid doesn't stand a chance. She'll be extraordinary, Kieran said with absolute certainty. Just like her mother. That night, as they lay in bed with Sage's head on his chest and his hand resting protectively over Luna, everything felt perfect, complete, like all the pieces of their lives had finally clicked into place. I can't wait to meet her, Kieran murmured into the darkness. 3.5 weeks, Sage replied sleepily. Give or take. I'll be here, he promised. Whatever happens, wherever you need me to be, I'll be here. It was a promise he meant with every fiber of his being. It was also a promise that, in less than a week, his own fear would make him break. The letter was sitting on the kitchen counter when she came home from her doctor's appointment. Sage set down her purse and stared at the cream-colored envelope with her name written in Kieran's precise handwriting. Her hands were shaking as she tore it open, though she couldn't say why. Maybe it was the silence in the apartment. He'd promised to be here when she got back from her 34-week checkup. Maybe it was the way he'd been quiet during breakfast, distracted in a way that felt different from his usual work concerns. Or maybe it was the instinct every woman develops when the man she loves is about to break her heart. My dearest Sage, by the time you read this, I'll be on a plane back to San Francisco. I know this isn't how you expected today to go. It's not how I planned it either. But last night, watching you sleep with your hand on your belly, watching Luna move under your skin, I realized something that terrifies me more than any business deal or boardroom confrontation ever has. I don't know how to be what you need me to be. Sage had to stop reading and sit down. The kitchen chair felt cold against her back, and Luna was moving restlessly, as if she too could sense something was wrong. I've been lying to myself for 2 months, thinking I could just learn how to be a father, how to be the partner you deserve. But last night I looked at you both and saw my future, our future, and all I could think about was how many ways I could fail you. What if I'm not strong enough when Luna gets sick? What if I don't know how to comfort her when she cries? What if I make the wrong decision in a crisis? What if I turn out to be like my own father, distant, cold, more concerned with providing than being present? You chose to do this alone because you're brave enough to trust yourself. I'm not brave enough to trust myself with something so precious. I love you both more than I've ever loved anything in my life. That's exactly why I have to leave. You deserve someone who knows how to love without fear, someone who won't spend every day terrified of failing you. Take care of our girl. Tell her Daddy loved her enough to know when he wasn't enough. Forever yours, Kieran. P.S. I've transferred money to your account. Enough for Luna's college, for whatever you both need. It's not about obligation. It's about love. The letter slipped from Sage's numb fingers to the kitchen floor. For a long moment, she just sat there, staring at the empty apartment that had felt so full of promise just that morning. The crib he'd assembled, the rocking chair where he'd read pregnancy books, the refrigerator covered with ultrasound photos they'd studied together, planning Luna's future. All of it felt hollow now, meaningless. She picked up her phone with trembling hands and called him. It went straight to voicemail. Kieran, it's me. Please call me back. We can talk about this. Whatever you're afraid of, we can figure it out together. That's what people do when they love each other. They figure it out together. Please don't do this. Please don't leave us. She hung up and immediately called again. Voicemail again. I don't need you to be perfect, she said to his recording, her voice breaking. I just need you to be here. Luna needs you to be here. You promised, Kieran. You promised you'd be here. The third call went to voicemail too. This time she couldn't speak through her tears. The apartment felt enormous and suffocating at the same time. Every room held memories of him, of them. The bathroom where he'd helped her when morning sickness was bad. The living room where they'd practiced breathing exercises. The bedroom where they'd talked about baby names and made love with a tenderness that had taken her breath away. Avery found her there 2 hours later, sitting on the kitchen floor with the letter clutched in her hands, crying so hard she could barely breathe. Sage? Jesus, what happened? Avery dropped her purse and knelt beside her sister, her arms still in a cast but her embrace fierce and protective. He left, Sage whispered. He just left. Who left? Kieran. Avery's voice sharpened with anger. What do you mean he left? Sage handed her the letter. watching her sister's face cycle through confusion, disbelief, and finally fury. "That coward," Avery said when she finished reading. "That absolute coward. He's scared," Sage said, though she wasn't sure why she was defending him. "He thinks he'll fail us. So instead he guarantees he'll fail you by running away." Avery's voice was fierce. "Sage, honey, listen to me. This isn't about you. This isn't about Luna. This is about a man who got scared and chose the easy way out." "It doesn't feel easy," Sage said quietly. "The easy way out never does, but it's still the wrong choice." They sat on the kitchen floor together as the afternoon faded to evening, Avery holding her sister while Sage cried for the family she'd thought she was building, for the man who'd promised to stay and then disappeared like smoke. Luna kicked restlessly throughout the night, as if she too was looking for the voice that had become as familiar as her mother's heartbeat. But Kieran Vale was gone, and all that remained was the echo of promises he'd been too afraid to keep. The question was, would he ever find the courage to come back? 1 year later, and Luna had her father's eyes. Sage adjusted the baby carrier on her chest as she navigated through the bustling Saturday market in downtown Seattle. At 11 months old, Luna was a perfect blend of curiosity and mischief, her bright blue eyes taking in everything with the kind of wonder that made even the most ordinary moments feel magical. She babbled constantly now, a stream of nonsense syllables that Sage pretended to understand completely. "What do you think, little love?" Sage asked, stopping at a vendor selling organic baby food. "Oh, sweet potato or butternut squash?" Luna reached for a sample container, knocking it over with the kind of precision that suggested she knew exactly what she was doing. "Butternut squash it is," Sage laughed, catching the container before it hit the ground. Seattle had been a good choice. After Luna was born, Sage had realized she couldn't stay in Portland. Too many memories. Too many places where she expected to see Kieran's face. Dr. Morrison at Seattle Children's Hospital had offered her a position in their high-risk obstetrics unit, and Avery had convinced her to take it. "Fresh start," her sister had said. "New city, new apartment, new life, just you and Luna." And it had been good. Really good. Their small apartment in Queen Anne had a view of the Sound, and Luna loved watching the ferries from her high chair during breakfast. Sage had thrown herself into work with renewed passion, finding purpose in helping other women navigate complicated pregnancies. Her colleagues were kind, her patients were grateful, and slowly, carefully, she'd built a life that felt stable and whole. Most days, she didn't think about Kieran at all. Most days, "Dr. Caldwell?" Sage turned at the sound of her name, expecting to see a patient or colleague. Instead, she found herself face to face with a woman about her own age, with perfectly styled blonde hair and the kind of designer clothes that screamed money. "I'm sorry, do we know each other?" Sage asked politely. "Not exactly. I'm Cassandra Thorne." The woman paused as if the name should mean something. "I work with Kieran Vale." The world tilted slightly. Luna, sensing her mother's sudden tension, looked up with concerned blue eyes and made a soft questioning sound. "I see," Sage said carefully, though she didn't see it all. "Can I help you with something?" "Actually, I was hoping we could talk." "About Kieran?" Cassandra's smile was perfectly polished and completely cold. "Maybe grab coffee. I promise it won't take long." Every instinct Sage had developed as a mother screamed at her to walk away, but something in the woman's tone, a hint of desperation beneath the polish, made her nod toward a nearby cafe. They found a quiet table in the corner, Luna content to chew on her favorite teething ring, while the two women studied each other across the small space. "He doesn't know I'm here," Cassandra said without preamble. "In fact, he'd probably fire me if he found out." "Then why are you here?" "Because he's destroying himself, and I can't watch it anymore." Cassandra's perfectly composed facade cracked slightly. "Do you know what he's been like this past year? He works 18-hour days, takes meetings at midnight, hasn't taken a vacation or a weekend off in months. He looks like he hasn't slept properly since he left," Sage finished quietly. "He hired private investigators, you know, to find you. When he couldn't reach you, when you moved without leaving a forwarding address, he went crazy trying to track you down." Sage's grip tightened on her coffee cup. "He made his choice. He made a mistake." Cassandra leaned forward, her voice urgent. "A stupid, terrified mistake that he's been paying for every day since." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I've known Kieran for 5 years, and I've never seen him care about anything the way he cared about you." Because he has a photo of an ultrasound in his desk drawer that he thinks no one knows about. Because he still wears the watch you gave him for his birthday, even though the band is falling apart. Sage felt something crack inside her chest. She'd given him that watch during their 2 months together. A simple gesture that had meant everything to him because no one had ever given him a birthday gift before. And because, Cassandra continued, he needs to know about her. Her eyes moved to Luna, who was babbling happily and reaching for the small vase of flowers on their table. He needs to know she's okay. He needs to know you're okay. Even if you never want to see him again, he deserves to know that you're both healthy and happy. We are, Sage said quietly. Happy? I can see that. Cassandra's smile was gentler now, more genuine. She's beautiful. She has his eyes. Everyone says that. Sage looked down at Luna, who was now attempting to grab her mother's coffee cup with determined little fingers. I thought I'd imagined the resemblance. You didn't. Cassandra pulled out her phone, scrolling through photos until she found what she was looking for. This is him at our company retreat last month. Tell me you don't see it. The photo showed Kieran in casual clothes, laughing at something off camera. But even in the candid shot, there was something hollow in his expression, a sadness that hadn't been there before. And his eyes, those same bright blue eyes that looked back at Sage every morning from Luna's face. Why should I care? Sage asked, though her voice lacked conviction. Because you loved him. Because maybe you still do. And because that little girl deserves to know her father, if there's any chance he could be the man you both need him to be. Sage was quiet for a long moment, watching Luna explore the texture of the tablecloth with scientific precision. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. What if he runs again? Then you'll know for sure that you're better off without him, Cassandra said simply. But what if he doesn't? As they parted ways outside the cafe, Cassandra pressed a business card into Sage's hand. His direct number is on the back. He'll answer if you call. Sage tucked the card into her purse and tried to forget about it. But that night, as she rocked Luna to sleep, she found herself wondering, what if some mistakes deserved a second chance? She almost walked right past him. Sage was juggling Luna on her hip and trying to open the door to grind coffee with her free hand when she heard it. That laugh she'd tried so hard to forget. Deep, warm, and achingly familiar. Her head turned automatically toward the sound. And there he was. Kieran sat at a corner table, his laptop open but forgotten, his attention focused entirely on his phone as someone on the other end apparently told him something amusing. He looked different, thinner, his usually perfect hair slightly disheveled, his suit expensive but wrinkled as if he'd slept in it, but his eyes were the same brilliant blue, and when he smiled at whatever he was hearing, Sage felt her knees go weak. Luna babbled loudly, the sound carrying across the small cafe, and Kieran's head snapped up. Their eyes met across 20 feet of space and 1 year of silence, and the world stopped. He ended his call without saying goodbye, his phone clattering to the table as he stood so quickly his chair nearly toppled over. For a moment they just stared at each other, neither moving, neither breathing. Then Luna made her decision for them. She reached toward Kieran with both tiny hands, making the excited gurgling sound she usually reserved for her favorite toy. Luna, Sage whispered, her voice catching on their daughter's name. Kieran's face went white, then flushed with color so intense it was almost painful to watch. His eyes moved from Sage to the baby and back again, taking in every detail. Luna's bright blue eyes, her dark hair that curled just like his, the way she was reaching for him as if she'd been waiting her whole life for this moment. His voice cracked. God, Sage, she's beautiful. She's yours, Sage said quietly, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Kieran took a step forward, then stopped, his hands clenched at his sides. Would it be okay if I... Mama? Luna said suddenly, clearly, and both adults froze. It was her first real word, spoken at the exact moment she finally met her father. She said Mama, Kieran whispered, wonder and heartbreak warring in his expression. She's been trying to say it for weeks, Sage managed, though tears were streaming down her cheeks. She picked a hell of a moment to get it right. They stood there in the middle of the busy coffee shop, the familiar chaos of Seattle life continuing around them while their world rewrote itself. Other customers moved past with their laptops and their urgent conversations, completely unaware that everything had just changed. Sage, Kieran said finally, his voice raw with emotion. I'm so sorry. I'm so goddamn sorry I can't even... Not here, she said quickly, glancing around at the curious faces beginning to notice their drama. Luna needs her nap anyway. There's a park 2 blocks from here, the one with the duck pond. I'll follow you, he said immediately. Kieran? She stopped him with a hand on his arm, feeling the way he trembled at her touch. Don't disappear again. If we're going to do this, if we're going to talk, you have to promise me you won't just vanish when it gets hard. I promise, he said, his eyes never leaving her face. I swear to you, Sage, I will never run away again. The park was quiet for a Tuesday afternoon, just a few joggers and dog walkers enjoying the mild Seattle weather. Sage found a bench near the playground while Kieran stood awkwardly a few feet away, clearly wanting to come closer but not sure if he was welcome. You can sit, she said softly. She won't bite. She might, Kieran said with a ghost of his old humor as he settled carefully on the opposite end of the bench. She looks like she has opinions. She gets that from both sides, Sage replied, adjusting Luna so she could see Kieran clearly. Their daughter studied him with the serious concentration only babies could manage, her blue eyes, so like his, taking in every detail of his face. Then, as if she'd reached some internal decision, she smiled. It was a real smile, the kind that lit up her whole face and made her eyes crinkle at the corners, the kind that made grown men fall completely, irrevocably in love. Kieran made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. Hi, baby girl, he whispered. I'm your daddy. I know I'm late, but I'm here now. Luna reached for him again, and this time Sage didn't hesitate. She shifted closer on the bench, close enough that Kieran could touch their daughter's tiny hand. The moment Luna's fingers wrapped around his, Kieran broke completely. Years of carefully controlled emotion, months of regret and longing and desperate love came pouring out in silent tears that he didn't even try to hide. I looked for you, he said, his voice thick. For months I looked for you. When I couldn't find you, I thought I'd lost my chance forever. Why did you look? Sage asked quietly. You're the one who left. Because I realized I'd made the worst mistake of my life. Because I love you both more than my own life, and I was an idiot to think fear was stronger than love. He looked at her then, his eyes raw with honesty. Because a year without you taught me that failing at being your partner would have been infinitely better than succeeding at being alone. Luna chose that moment to grab a fistful of his expensive tie, tugging with the kind of determination that suggested she had no intention of letting go. Smart girl, Sage said softly, and for the first time in a year she smiled at him, really smiled. Sage, he said carefully, what do we do now? She looked at their daughter, who was still clutching Kieran's tie like a lifeline, then back at the man who had broken her heart and somehow still held all the pieces. Now, she said quietly, we figure out if love is enough to fix what fear broke. But even as she said it, watching Luna babble happily at her father while he looked at her like she'd hung the moon, Sage began to suspect that maybe, just maybe, it was. The fever started at 3 a.m. Sage jolted awake to Luna's frantic crying. Not her usual fussy cry, but something sharp and desperate that sent ice through her veins. She was in Luna's nursery in seconds, her hands already reaching for her daughter's burning forehead. Oh God, baby, you're on fire, she whispered, lifting Luna from her crib. The thermometer read 104.2 degrees Fahrenheit, and Luna's little body was limp in her arms, her breathing shallow and rapid. Sage's medical training kicked in even as her mother's heart threatened to shatter. Febrile seizure risk, dehydration, emergency room. Now, her hands shook as she called 911, then grabbed the hospital bag she'd kept packed since Luna was born, old habits from her high-risk pregnancy days. But as she was about to leave, she realized she couldn't do this alone. Not this time. She called Kieran. He answered on the first ring, his voice instantly alert despite the early hour. Sage, what's wrong? It's Luna. Her voice broke on their daughter's name. She has a fever of 104 and I'm taking her to Seattle Children's. I know we said we'd take things slow, but I can't. I'm on my way, he said without hesitation. Which hospital? Seattle Children's Emergency. 20 minutes. Less. She could hear him moving, getting dressed, probably already halfway out the door. Sage, listen to me. You're a doctor. You know what to do. Luna's going to be okay. But Luna wasn't okay. By the time the ambulance arrived, she'd had a febrile seizure that lasted 47 seconds, the longest 47 seconds of Sage's life. She rode in the back, holding Luna's tiny hand while the paramedics worked, her own medical knowledge becoming a curse as she cataloged every possible worst-case scenario. Kieran was waiting when they arrived, still in yesterday's wrinkled dress shirt and looking like he'd driven through hell to get there. He took one look at Sage's face and immediately wrapped his arms around both of them. "What do we know?" he asked Dr. Martinez, the attending physician, with the calm authority that had built his empire. "Likely viral meningitis. But we're running tests to rule out bacterial," Dr. Martinez explained. "We've started IV fluids and antibiotics as a precaution. The next few hours will tell us more." The next few hours were a nightmare of waiting rooms and test results, of Luna's small body dwarfed by hospital equipment, while machines monitored every breath. Sage paced like a caged animal, her medical knowledge useless in the face of her terror. Kieran sat by Luna's bedside, talking to her in a steady, gentle voice about everything and nothing: his work, the weather, the book he'd been reading about baby development. "She knows your voice," Sage said finally, watching Luna's vitals stabilize slightly whenever Kieran spoke. "I've been talking to her picture every night for a year," he admitted quietly, telling her about my day, reading her stories. "I know it sounds crazy, but it doesn't sound crazy." Sage sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "It sounds like love." At hour 6, when Luna's fever finally broke and she opened her eyes to focus clearly on both their faces, Sage broke down completely. All the fear, all the exhaustion, all the months of carrying everything alone came pouring out in ugly, desperate sobs. Kieran gathered her against his chest while keeping one hand on Luna's tiny arm, and for the first time in over a year, Sage let herself be held. "I was so scared," she whispered into his shirt. "I was so scared I was going to lose her." "You didn't," he said fiercely. "She's going to be fine. The doctor said so. What if you hadn't been here? What if I'd had to do this alone? But you didn't have to. I was here. I'm here." His arms tightened around her. "And I'm not going anywhere ever again. You said that before. I was a coward before." He pulled back to look at her, his blue eyes blazing with intensity. "I was terrified of being the wrong man for you, of failing when it mattered. But today, when you called me and you needed me, I realized something." "What?" "The only way I can truly fail you is by not being here to try." His hand moved to cup her face, his thumb brushing away her tears. "I'd rather be here making mistakes than somewhere else being perfect. I'd rather fail at being your partner 1,000 times than succeed at being alone." Luna made a soft sound, and they both turned to see her looking at them with curious, fever-clear eyes. She reached one tiny hand toward Kieran, and when he offered his finger, she gripped it with surprising strength. "Dada," she said clearly, and both adults froze. "Did she just—" Kieran's voice cracked. "Her second word," Sage whispered, tears starting fresh. "She waited for you to be here." "I love you," Kieran said suddenly, desperately, his eyes moving between Sage and Luna. "I love you both so much it terrifies me, but I'm done letting terror make my decisions. Marry me, Sage. Let me be Luna's father legally, officially, forever. Let me be the man you both deserve, even if it takes me the rest of my life to figure out how. Kieran, I know I don't deserve another chance. I know I broke your trust and abandoned you when you needed me most. But if there's any part of you that still loves me, if there's any way you could forgive me, please." "Yes," she said quietly. He stopped mid-sentence. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I forgive you. Yes, I still love you, even though you broke my heart." She smiled through her tears. "But if you ever leave us again, Kieran Vale, I will hunt you down and make you wish you'd never been born." His answering smile was brilliant, transformative, noted and accepted. As they sat in that hospital room, with Luna gripping both their hands and their future spreading out before them like a promise, Sage realized something profound. Sometimes the best love stories weren't about perfect people finding perfect love. Sometimes they were about broken people choosing to heal together. And sometimes, just sometimes, that was exactly enough. The morning light filtered through the kitchen windows of their Mercer Island home, casting golden squares across the hardwood floor, where Luna sat building an elaborate tower of blocks. At 4 years old, she had her father's determination and her mother's precision, carefully placing each piece with the kind of focus that suggested she was engineering something far more complex than a simple tower. "Higher, Daddy," she commanded as Kieran knelt beside her, holding steady the base of their construction project. "It needs to touch the sky." Sky-touching towers are serious business, Kieran said solemnly, handing her another block. Are you sure we have the proper permits? Luna giggled, a sound that still made Sage's heart skip a beat from across the kitchen where she was packing lunches. 3 years of marriage, and she still sometimes couldn't believe this was her life. This beautiful chaos of family breakfasts and permission slips and debates about whether cartoon character Band-Aids were appropriate for preschool. Mommy, tell Daddy that towers don't need permits, Luna called out, her blue eyes sparkling with mischief that was purely her own. I think Daddy's just being responsible, Sage replied, sealing Luna's lunchbox with the dinosaur stickers she insisted made her sandwiches taste better. Safety first when you're building something important. Kieran caught her eye over Luna's head and smiled. One of those private, intimate smiles that spoke of shared jokes and midnight conversations, and the kind of love that had been tested by fire and emerged stronger. They'd learned to communicate in these small moments, stolen glances over their daughter's head that said everything they couldn't say out loud in 4-year-old company. 15 minutes until we need to leave for school, Sage announced, then added to Kieran, and you have that conference call with Tokyo at 10. Already moved it to this afternoon, he said easily, carefully positioning another block on Luna's tower. First day of summer camp is a bigger priority than quarterly projections. It was such a small thing, but it represented everything that had changed. The old Kieran would never have rescheduled a meeting for a 4-year-old's milestone. This Kieran, their Kieran, understood that some moments only happened once. Will you pick me up today, Daddy? Luna asked, leaning against his shoulder with the casual affection that still amazed Sage. For all her fears about Kieran's ability to connect, Luna had never known a world where her father wasn't completely devoted to her. Wouldn't miss it, he promised, but I want to hear all about finger painting and story time and whatever new friends you make, okay? Okay. Luna jumped up, abandoning her tower to throw her arms around his neck. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, little architect, he whispered into her hair. More than all the towers in all the world. Sage watched them together and felt that familiar tightness in her chest. Not the anxiety that had once plagued her, but pure contentment. They'd built something beautiful here, something that had started with a chance meeting in an airport and survived separation, fear, and the most terrifying night of their lives in a hospital room. Ready for your big day? Sage asked, kneeling to Luna's level as Kieran gathered the scattered blocks. I'm ready for everything, Luna declared with the confidence of a child who'd never doubted she was loved. Daddy says I'm brave like Mommy. You're braver than both of us, Sage said, smoothing her daughter's dark curls. You're going to do amazing things, Luna Vale. Luna Vale. She'd taken Kieran's name when they married, a symbol of the family they'd chosen to build together. Sometimes Sage caught herself marveling at how easily their lives had intertwined, how naturally they'd fallen into the rhythm of shared decisions and bedtime routines and Saturday morning pancakes. The drive to Luna's summer camp was filled with chatter about art projects and playground equipment, but when they arrived, Luna suddenly went quiet, pressing closer to Sage as they approached the bright building filled with laughing children. What if they don't like me? She whispered, a rare moment of vulnerability from their usually fearless daughter. Kieran knelt beside her, his voice gentle but certain. Hey Luna, do you know what I see when I look at you? She shook her head. I see a girl who builds towers that touch the sky. I see someone who makes friends with every dog in the neighborhood and knows all their names. I see a little person with the biggest heart and the brightest smile. He touched her nose gently. How could anyone not love you? But what if they do love you? Sage interrupted softly. What if you make the best friend you've ever had? What if you have so much fun you don't want to come home? Luna considered this with the seriousness she brought to all of life's big questions. Then, squaring her shoulders in a gesture that was pure Kieran, she nodded decisively. Okay, I'm ready. They walked her to her classroom, where a cheerful teacher with paint-stained fingers welcomed her warmly. Within minutes, Luna was deep in conversation with a boy her age about the proper way to mix colors, her earlier nervousness forgotten. She's going to be fine, the teacher assured them as they lingered in the doorway. They always are, once they find their people. Walking back to the car, Kieran took Sage's hand, their fingers intertwining automatically. They'd learned to hold on to each other through everything, the good days and the challenging ones, the moments of pure joy and the times when parenting felt impossible. Remember when we were terrified we wouldn't know how to be a family? Sage asked, as they drove home through the tree-lined streets of their neighborhood. "I remember when I was terrified I'd ruin everything," Kieran corrected. "You were always sure we'd figure it out." "Was I?" She thought back to those early days after Luna's birth, the sleepless nights and constant worry, the way she'd watched Kieran for signs he might bolt again. "I think I was just hoping." "Hope was enough," he said quietly. "Hope and stubbornness and the fact that Luna was born knowing exactly how to wrap us both around her finger." They spent the morning in comfortable domesticity, Kieran working from his home office while Sage caught up on medical journals, both of them checking the clock more often than necessary until it was time for pickup. When they arrived at the camp, Luna came running toward them with a huge smile and paint in her hair. "Mommy, Daddy, I made a best friend and we painted a castle, and Miss Jenny says I'm an artist, and can we have Jackson over for a play date and—" "Slow down, little love," Sage laughed, scooping her up despite her protests that she was too big to be carried. "Tell us everything." That evening, as they sat on their back deck watching Luna chase fireflies in their garden, Sage felt a deep sense of completion. Not the kind of ending that closed a book, but the kind of beginning that opened infinite possibilities. "Do you ever think about that night in Wyoming?" she asked Kieran, as Luna's laughter echoed across their yard. "Every day," he said simply. "Best storm of my life." Even though it was terrifying, especially because it was terrifying, he pulled her closer against his side. "All the best things are a little scary at first." As if summoned by their conversation, Luna ran over and climbed into the space between them, her small body warm and sticky with summer heat and happiness. "Are you guys talking about grown-up stuff?" she asked with the suspicion of a child who'd learned that grown-up conversations often meant bedtime was approaching. "We're talking about how lucky we are," Sage said, pressing a kiss to the top of Luna's head. "Lucky how?" "Lucky to have each other," Kieran said, his arm tightening around both his girls. "Lucky to have this house and this garden and all these fireflies. And lucky to have the best tower builder in the world," Sage added, making Luna giggle. They sat there as the sun set over Puget Sound, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that rivaled any of Luna's artwork. Three people who'd found each other against all odds, who'd chosen love over fear and stayed over leaving, who'd built something beautiful from broken pieces. Sometimes the greatest love stories weren't about perfect meetings or flawless people. Sometimes they were about second chances and hard-won trust and the courage to believe that some things were worth fighting for. And sometimes, on perfect summer evenings with fireflies dancing and a 4-year-old's laughter filling the air, you realized that the fight had been worth everything. What would you do if you had a second chance at love? Would you have the courage to trust again even after your heart had been broken? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.